A turbo direct injected 4-cylinder can sound fine on a Copart lot, idle smooth, slip into gear, and move 10 feet under its own power, then grenade a piston on the first hard pull home. That is not drama. That is exactly why this 2026 Copart hustle works. People see run and drive, they see a fresh oil sticker, they hear no death rattle for 60 seconds, and they talk themselves into believing the crash damage is the only problem. Here's the catch. Copart's own wording says run and drive only means the vehicle started, went into gear, and moved under its own power when it arrived. It also says there is no guarantee it will still start, drive, or even be roadworthy when you pick it up. That gap between what buyers assume and what the label really means is where a sick engine gets passed off as a decent deal. Real talk. The new scam is not always fake paperwork or some cartoon villain VIN switch. Often it is simpler and nastier. It is cosmetic engine triage. Fresh oil. Maybe a thicker fill than the factory wanted. Maybe an additive meant to hush chain noise or soften a knock for one preview cycle. Maybe the codes were cleared, the battery was charged, and the engine was warmed for the transport photos. The listing says full synthetic, serviced, maintained, sounds great. The buyer sees collision damage and misses the far more expensive story happening inside the crankcase. On modern turbo GDI engines, that story can be LSPI scars, timing chain stretch, fuel dilution, and turbo deposit buildup, all of which can hide behind a quick start auction video long enough to take your money. Now layer 1, what the brand claim sounds like. Fresh full synthetic means protected. Run and drive means healthy. Dealer maintained means safe. That sounds good, but it is fluff, unless the oil meets the right spec for the engine. March 31st, 2025 is the date that matters here. That is when API Sequin-ILSAC GF7 became the new gasoline oil baseline. According to API's Motor Oil Guide, API Seq was introduced in March 2025 to improve protection against both fresh and aged oil LSPI, improve timing chain wear protection, and improve high-temperature deposit control for pistons and turbochargers. GF7A did the same for mainstream passenger car grades, while GF7B applies only to SAE 0W16 oils under the API Shield mark. So if somebody tells you a 2025 or 2026 turbo car got fresh synthetic, that statement means almost nothing unless the bottle actually meets the spec the engine was designed around. That matters because LSPI is not some nerdy oil forum ghost story. It is a real failure mode in boosted direct injection engines. It happens at low RPM and high load when a stray oil fuel droplet or deposit lights off before the spark event and creates a brutal pressure spike. One event can crack ringlands, bend rods, or hammer bearings. Based on API-CQ and GF7 test updates, the industry finally stopped pretending fresh oil protection was enough. The new standard adds aged oil LSPI protection because the oil has to survive the whole drain interval, not just the first week after the change. That is a big deal for auction cars because the sketchy seller only needs the engine to behave for the sale, while you need it to behave after 5 heat cycles, a highway merge, and a hard uphill pull with the AC on. Now the chemistry, because this is where the fake confidence falls apart. Calcium detergents matter. They neutralize acids and help keep hot parts clean. But Infinium's published work on LSPI showed a direct relationship between higher calcium concentration and more LSPI events in test oils, while magnesium behaved more like neutral ground in that work. ZDP was shown as a strong LSPI quencher, but phosphorus limits exist because nobody wants to poison catalytic converters. That's where formulation balance matters. You cannot just dump random additive soup into a bottle and call it protection. Boron is another piece of the puzzle. In tribology work and formulation literature, boron-containing dispersants and anti-wear chemistry help at the metal surface, building boundary films and working with other additives rather than replacing them. That surface film behavior matters at the chain pins, links, rings, and turbo bearings where real wear starts. Timing chain wear is a perfect example. Stretch chain is not just noise. It changes cam timing, hurts efficiency, can trigger codes, and in bad cases turns into a mechanical bill you never forget. Infinium's chain wear work on fired GTDI testing showed poorer oils produced deeper wear scars, and the aged chains showed evidence of tribofilm on the links. In plain English, the oil is not just wetting the chain. It is laying down a chemical survival layer. Formulation work aimed at reducing chain stretch has also shown that higher boron and molybdenum, balanced with calcium, magnesium, and ZDDP, can reduce stretch. So when a seller fresh fills an engine with mystery oil just to quiet it down, the question is not whether the dipstick looks amber. The question is whether the oil can protect boundary contacts under load, or just buy silence for the auction lane. That's where it gets tricky. A quiet engine for 90 seconds is not proof of good tribology. Layer 2 is what the technical crowd argues. According to independent lab teardowns and used oil analysis people, The oil tells the truth long before the engine does. Speed Diagnostics basically built its whole pitch around catching rare metals, fuel dilution, and contamination before the expensive bang. Blackstone Laboratories has published examples where oil analysis pointed owners toward timing chain, tensioner, sludge, fuel dilution, and bearing trouble before total failure. Even the common consensus on Bob is the oil guy discussions is pretty boring. The label on the jug matters less than the approval, the interval, and the trend in wear data. In other words, the real experts do not get hypnotized by fresh, full synthetic. They want to know what spec, what viscosity, what engine family, how much fuel dilution, and what the last sample looked like. That is accountant logic, not marketing logic. So here is the real-world conclusion. The scam is not that oil causes every Copart failure. The scam is that fresh oil can temporarily hide the evidence of neglect, wrong viscosity, wrong approval, extended drains, and light mechanical damage on engines that are already living close to the edge. A turbo GDI engine with chain wear, sticky rings, and fuel-thinned oil may sound fine after a last-minute oil swap. Then you drive it like a normal person, the oil shears, the fuel load comes back, the hot spots show up, and suddenly the great deal needs a turbo, a chain job, or a whole long block. Auto repair guides regularly put engine replacement in the roughly $3,000 to $8,000 plus range, and that number climbs fast on newer turbo stuff. So paying an extra 15 or 20 bucks for a real top-tier synthetic with the correct approval is not expensive. It is cheap insurance. 2 oil changes a year means maybe 40 bucks extra. Over 5 years, call it 200. That is pocket change next to one engine bill. And if you are buying at auction, the oil story should change how you bid. If the seller claims recent service, ask yourself the annoying questions before you ever click bid. What engine is it really? Does it call for 0W16, 0W20, or something else? If it is a 0W16 application, do you see evidence of a real GF7B oil with the API shield, not just synthetic in big letters? If it is a 0W20 or 5W30 turbo engine, do you have any proof it got an API SKU or GF7A level oil? Are you looking at a mystery change done to make it idle nicely? And please do not fall for clean filler caps and golden dipsticks. Oil can be fresh and still be wrong. Oil can be wrong and still be quiet. Those are not the same thing. If you bought from Copart or IAA, tell me the vehicle, the engine, the mileage, and the oil change interval you found in the records, because that stuff matters way more than the seller's smile. And if you are running a Turbo 4 right now, tell me your exact setup too. Year, make, engine, mileage, what oil you use, and how often you change it. I want the nerdy details. Here's another one. Pick a side. 5,000-mile changes or the factory recommended 10K. I know people get emotional about this, but on fuel-diluting turbo GDI stuff, that answer can be the difference between a happy timing chain and an ugly teardown. My verdict is simple. A fresh oil change at auction is not maintenance history. It is a costume. Sometimes it means the owner cared. Sometimes it means somebody needed the engine to behave just long enough to unload it. So the blueprint for longevity is dead simple. First, buy the engine family, not the listing title. Research whether that motor is known for LSPI sensitivity, chain wear, or fuel dilution before you bid. Second, trust approvals, not adjectives. Look for the correct API SEEK or ILSAC GF7 mark that matches the required viscosity, especially on late model turbo cars. Third, after purchase, assume the oil is unknown no matter what the sticker says. Change it immediately with the right spec and a quality filter. Fourth, pull a used oil sample early, because one lab report is cheaper than one bad guess. Fifth, listen for cold start chain noise, watch fuel trims, and do not stretch intervals just because the seller said the oil is new. That blueprint is not flashy, but it works. It cuts through the noise, the detail spray, the warm engine startup video, and the fake comfort of amber oil on a dipstick. The engine does not care about a sales pitch. It cares about film strength, surface chemistry, clean ring lands, low deposits, and whether the oil can still protect when it is old, hot, and fuel contaminated. That is why API SEEK and GF7 matter. That is why Blackstone and Speed Diagnostics matter. That is why the boring guys on Bob is the Oil Guy keep asking for oil specs and sample history instead of pretty pictures. Buy the wrong auction car, and the fresh oil only lasts until the truth gets hot. Buy the right one, fill it right, sample it early, and you give that engine a real chance. And the wild part is, the deeper rabbit hole might not even be the oil,